Am I surrounded by things? Am I surrounded by emptiness? Am I surrounded by both? Am I surrounded by neither? This is Thomas Adams welcoming you to another stage in our exploration of world religions. Buddhism is in many ways a reaction to Hinduism. The Hindu triad of fuel, air, and heat is negated in Buddhism to give us another worldview. The fuel of Hinduism was the caste system. Buddhism gives us the Eightfold Path. Siddhartha Gautama, the founder of Buddhism, was born in a Hindu world. He was a prince in northern India, but a prince who saw that there was more to the world than what his caste provided. The other two elements in the Hindu triad of wisdom, the atmosphere, the Atman, and the devotion, the desire, these both signify unity or concentration. And with Buddhism, what we get is detachment. Think of a hammock on a ship. It provides the lack of movement because it takes into account that everything around it on the ship is moving. On a ship, you're constantly in motion. The hammock stays steady because it takes into account that fact. If one were to sleep on the ground of the deck, they would constantly be in motion. But if they allow themselves to be detached from the rest of the ship per se, they can remain steady. I use this image to bring up the element of desire in Buddhism. Buddhism wants us to be detached from desire. Once we are detached, then there is in essence a liberation, a freedom. Desire only leads to grasping at the things around us, coveting, wanting, greed, and that sends us, in the Buddhist view, the never-ending cycle of samsara. Detach yourself from that desire and you become detached from the never-ending cycle. Not only are you to detach yourself, but yourself is in some ways detached from existence. Ourselves are always in flux, moving from one moment to the next, like a flame. A flame is constantly in motion. So what we have to realize or take into account is that it is constantly in motion. And when we realize that ourselves are constantly in motion and that we are not to desire the things around us, trying to grasp at that which is constantly in motion, we free ourselves from that. We then attain enlightenment. The Buddha means the enlightened one. And in his enlightenment, he gave us four noble truths. One, the world around us is filled with suffering. In fact, existence itself is suffering because people are grasping for things, continually grasping. What we have to do is realize that the cause of that grasping is our desire, the wanting to grab onto that which we cannot. We must free ourselves from that desire, free ourselves from the grasping. The way that I am surrounded by my possessions here in my garage, but not grasping at them, allows me a freedom in which to exist, a freedom in which to be a human being, existence itself. How one lives their life, because there is a practicality to Buddhism, is to follow not the dictates and dharmas of a caste system of hierarchical steps, but an eightfold path. And that word eightfold, think of paper that's folded over itself. The same paper, but multidimensional. Not to show everything compacted into one, but to show how everything connects. Buddhism is an attempt to try to see how everything around us connects. And when we realize that there are not hierarchical strictures, when we realize that ourselves are to be detached from permanence, and that we are not to desire anything with permanence, the flame within the Hindu triad becomes unbound. It becomes extinguished. The flame goes away, but also the never-ending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Enlightenment frees one from that cycle. Buddhism can be very confusing as well as very edifying, particularly for the Western mind. Next, we will turn from the flame unbound to the flame unconsumed, to the flame that continues on. From the Bodhi tree of enlightenment and the extinguishing of the flame in Buddhism, we will next turn our attention to a burning bush, a flame which is there without beginning, without end, but with continuity. We don't have here unity within a system. We will not have here the extinguishing of desire. We will have here something in another realm, something that goes beyond the flame unbound, become the burning bush of the divine. The divine not only of a God, but of God Almighty. Next, we will turn our gaze from the wonders of the East to the Middle East and the West, to that which has grown all over the world. And we will look at the religious views of monotheism. Till next time, this is Thomas Adams, signing off.